Extra, extra. Listen all about it here on the Extended Cutline podcast. Hey, say welcome back, or welcome to the show. If you haven't listened to a GX3 Media podcast, again, we call it the Extended Cutline, then hey, welcome. This is a good jumping on point. Hey, hi, I'm your host, Nate Beyer. I'm a big fan of numbering. And one of the considerations I decided to kind of think about was first episode of 2026. Hello, 2026. Do we start numbering our episodes over? Do we treat it like a new volume per se? And the answer was, yeah, why not? I like starting over. And if we redo the numbering, every January, then it can kind of keep our volumes of podcast episodes separate or separated or coagulated a certain way. Anyways, hi, everybody. Like I said in our quick introduction, extra, we're going to talk a little bit about newspapers today. If you don't like newspapers, well, guess what? I'm not going to make you read a newspaper. How about that? I would like it if you would. I think it's good for your brain. Reading is good for your brain. But we're going to talk a little bit about newspapers. I had this thought earlier this morning being Friday, January 9th. I had, oh gosh, it's been a week. It's kind of been a week of losses, let's say. We have not had a lot of victories this week. And it all started last Saturday. But on the way home from working on newspaper stuff, Thursday night / Friday morning, I said, I always like to find a way to take our newspaper product and send it up online somehow, whether it be through just sharing our visuals on my social media accounts. Again, GX3 Media can be found on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. I believe we have a TikTok page too, but I don't really update that. Logan has complete control of that, and right now she's sleeping someplace, I'm pretty sure. Anyways, my thought was, how do we get this week's newspapers some internet play? And then I thought about it. Hey, we put out our full complement of newspaper products this week. I'm the sports editor for the Monroe County Herald, the Hillsborough Century Enterprise, and then the Cash and Record. Between those, obviously that's 3 front pages, or 3 sections that we put out a week. But with the Monroe County Herald, technically we have 2 issues that we put out a week, which means I have 2 front pages. I like sharing the front pages. I like sharing a lot of the design work that we do simply because I want to inform others out there what I believe good design can be, especially when it comes to the newspaper product. As much as I get news online, as much as I get news like the rest of you guys do, we see it fly through our news feeds, not in newspaper layout form, or let's say page layout form, but differently. I do appreciate, and I always have, and I probably always will appreciate intelligent design when it comes to page layout. So we're going to get to that in a bit, but I want to lead into that. Again, I'm going to backtrack. Let's start with this week. We need a victory. My victory is, the victories I'm going to counter are moral victories at best. Today, standing here to record an episode of this podcast is a victory. Also, the sun is shining. That's a big win. But it all started, let's say, last Saturday. This is the downhill slide. I went and played volleyball in Arcadia. They had a draw tournament. A draw tournament, you show up, you get picked to go play on different teams. You don't really show up with a team. I love this format. I love playing with different people. I like the group that I had. We weren't very big. We weren't big at all, actually. They were all about my size. I had played with most of them before that point in time. I knew that we were going to struggle, but I also knew that, or believed that we had the fundamental skills to be competitive. And I think that we were for the most part. But personally for me, I was terrible all day for whatever reason, whether it was me not having played for, enough reps before then to be in a good groove or whatever. My serve receive was terrible. My passing was pretty bad. I did not help our team, and that continued throughout the day. And if you play any sport, whether you're, play baseball, softball, whatever, you know what it's like to get into a slump. And that's basically where I was, slash, where I am. I went and I run the open gym volleyball Sunday nights in Cashton. I thought that, maybe it would get better then. Different competition, pressure's a little different. And nope, the exact same thing happened. Everything I did was wrong. Every pass I stepped in to take went the opposite direction of where I wanted it to. Again, it really, really breaks your brain when this happens, right? Right? Okay, so let's try it again on Monday. Monday, I go to Reedsburg. I go to their open gym because I wanted to, again, try to get through this slump. And the only way to get through it is to just bury your head in it. What happens there? Pretty much the same thing. Yeah, there's one or two fair passes, but I'm not getting enough passes, enough consecutive passes that are good to the point where I feel really confident in that ability. So then we go to Wednesday. Wednesday, I show up at Viroqua. I go to our open gym and give it a shot again. Well, did we get better? I don't know. I think I made less egregious mistakes, but on the same hand, we're still in a slump. So this thing has been looming over me for a week or so. I know that I'm not the strongest passer, but I'm not as bad as what I have been. And that is absolutely defeating in the brain. Like I said, if you've ever been in a slump, whether it be throwing, catching, kicking, running, whatever, do runners have slumps? That's an interesting question. That's where I'm at there. So that sets us up for just bad vibes for the week, right? Right? Because like the fun hobby thing is again, and I don't just leave it in the gym. It goes with me because I want to fix it. I want to find a way to make it better. Anyways, let's talk about the professional things and how all those things maybe didn't necessarily help the cause either. Let's go to Tuesday. I had a plan for Tuesday that was going to include 3 or 4 games, and by the time we got done, we got 3 games in. But here's the thing: I didn't study my schedule well enough. I ended up in Toma watching the Aquinas boys play the Toma boys. I thought it was, on paper, that's a decent ball game. It turned out to be probably about a 25-point, difference. I slowly leave the gym, very casually. I exit the gym. I hang around afterwards. I talk to a couple people, and then I very casually leave the premises. And it's kind of the norm when the game is over and the night is done. I look the next day because I had a weird suspicion, and there it was. Down the street from the high school, I had a hockey game that I didn't even know about because I didn't study my schedule well enough. Am I upset about it? Absolutely. I mismanaged a lot of my bits and bobs that day, and that put me behind the 8 ball. Again, I'm a pretty big one where I like to have things planned out when it comes to my schedule so I can cause the most damage possible. And when it came to Tuesday's games, whiffed. Big whiff. Let's go to Thursday. So Thursday was pretty much maybe the worst of it. I worked on my newspaper pages. Again, I'm going to talk about this later on too. Thursday is the deadline for the Cashton record, so I'm just about done with my pages. Now, I've got 2 different documents open, one that I'm working on and the other one I'm copying some bits from because there's certain bits that are crossover news items. So to save me time, it doesn't make it, some little news things. I'm going to copy those and just move those over. Okay, I'm done copying. I close out the window. It asks me if I want to save any of these changes. And I say, no, of course not, because this is a document from, earlier in the day or the day before. It's all done. Close it. And then I look at what's open. And then I realize I closed the document and did not save the document that I actually was working on. So the 2 pages I had spent hours working on were destroyed. Well, not destroyed. They just didn't exist anymore. I reopened the file, and there you go. I actually thought that about half of it was there until I opened it, and then I saw that none of it was there, and I said, okay, we're going to leave now. So I left. I mean, I'm sorry. This was if you've ever had this happen, it's defeating. You put in all this work, you're on a deadline. My brain just said, nope, we're done. So I left, I took off. I just started heading south. I didn't look at my calendar. I just went south and I knew that there would be something happening in the south. I needed to get away from home. I needed to go do something a little different. I had a good plan, and once again, this is where things go wrong. I have a good plan. I went to Cuba City for wrestling. I was going to go to Southwestern for an early girls basketball game, and probably end up at Lancaster for a pretty important boys basketball game in the Southwest Wisconsin Conference. Well, once again, the plan gets shot up. Wrestling doesn't pan out the way that I want it to. It takes longer in a way than what I kind of expected, or the order of operations wasn't what I expected. So I cut the girls' basketball, went back to the other basketball, and that's fine. Great. Drive home. It's, keep in mind, if you maybe you had the same weather I did, gross weather. It's gloomy, it's rainy, it's pouring rain. And on the way home, I've got rain, I've got a little fog, whatever. All of a sudden, I hit this thing, and it sounds like if you've ever like ran something over that's on the road, not hitting a live animal, but hitting something that's already on the road, some sort of roadkill. That's what it sounded like. I had no idea what it was. I pulled over, and nothing seemed to be bad. Drove to Boscobel, got out at the Quick Trip, and some guy started, I'm looking under the car, and some guy yells at me, um, something, and I look up, and they're like, "Yeah, you hit the rock too?" And I said, "What? Wait, what?" "Yeah, there's a rock in the middle of the road. You must have hit it too." Like, oh. So apparently these guys drove over this rock. There was another vehicle there, and they had driven over this stupid rock that was in the road. Anyways, I drove over some sort of rock. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with the car. Everything seems to be in pretty good order. But at the time, there were, I hit a couple of things, a couple of bumps in the road that just felt weird on a night when the road is water covered and the water's kind of pulling you one way or the other. And then you hit this thing. I don't know. I never saw it. So, anyways, the bottom line is, it's kind of been a little nickel and dimey in terms of all the hits that I've taken this week. Yeah, nothing terrible, but still, like, it adds up, right? So I came back, fixed my newspaper pages, drove home probably about 3 a.m, and on the way home I said, "You know what? Let's talk about our front pages this week. That's maybe our podcast type topic, or I think it's a podcast topic. Let's go talk about front pages. Let's go talk about how we decide what goes on a front page and what is good, bad, or whatever." I mean, some of it comes from me wanting to educate. I think that for whatever reason, we don't always have the right idea of what we want to do, or we don't have good examples of how we want to do a thing. And sometimes what I see in the professional field, we aren't willing to say some of the most direct things we need to say. And anyways, today what I want to do is I want to go through our publication week. We had, like I said, 4 issues, and I want to talk about those things. And yes, it's going to be sports related. That's how it ties into what we do here. Again, GX3 Media, we cover sports. We talk about sports. We love going to sports. Let me check my notes here. I made a couple notes before I jumped on, just so that way I had some other things. Yep, slumping in the volleyball. Yep, cool. Hit the car with a rock. Lost the documents. That was terrible. All right, let's roll. Let's talk about some newspaper pages here. Again, like I said, we work on 4 publications in any given week. Sometimes we don't hit our 4. Sometimes we do. It kind of depends on our publication schedule. It kind of depends on where holidays fall. It kind of depends. There are weeks that it definitely depends on my own schedule. So you've seen the front page of a newspaper. Sometimes it makes you want to pick it up, and sometimes it doesn't. Well, I have philosophies of how I believe a front page should sit. A front page should be laid out. A front page should, honestly, they don't say judge a book by its cover, but in the newspaper business, in the magazine business, the periodicals, um, you do judge it by its cover. The cover is what gets you in. For me, growing up, certain comic book covers would get you into the story because either the artwork was wild, exciting, your favorite artist has that cover, so you want his piece of cover artwork, and that was a big deal. When I was starting out in photography, and I would go and I tried to peddle my wares for, around the area with our local newspapers, I typically would help out with interior artwork or secondary artwork, not the main artwork. Once in a while, I would end up providing artwork for a main story. Now, anybody that's kind of been in the field before, or it's kind of old fashioned, having that main story, that main artwork, that's a big deal. If you were one of the big feature stories inside like the Rolling Stone magazine, that's a big deal. That's something that you definitely talk about on your, in your resume, because that holds a sense of prominence. That means that you are good enough to be like the guy, the thing at that particular point in time. And kind of the same can kind of be said, when it comes to newspapers. Again, what I'm dealing with pretty small time newspapers. These circulations are pretty small overall. Um, we're dealing with a pretty small concentrated area. These are not giant regional papers. As much as I've tried to make this a little bit more regional, it's not. They serve, anywhere from two, three, four to five, maybe five or six communities. But even so, I feel like I take a lot of the front page principles that I've learned and gleaned and harbored for probably 20, 25 years. And I apply those to what we do with our page, with our papers. I think I vaguely remember having to do this, or I mean, going through with this when I was in charge of our student publication in college at Viterbo. When I was the Lumen editor, or even not the editor, just maybe the designer, there were decisions in everything that we did when it came to that front page. Everything kind of had a place. There was a reason why stuff went where it did. And that's something that I am really critical of other newspapers. And I look at a lot of them, we buy enough of them, and we look at the front page. And one of the first questions we ask is this: what is the most important thing? How can you tell? Now, if you ask certain writers, they will tell you this is the most important thing. And if you actually look at the design, the layout, it's a wonder how they can identify that, because that story looks just exactly the same as every other story. If you have an important thing, you want to make it be big, bigger, bolder, more colorful, right? Okay, so we're going to look at a couple of quick examples here of, or a couple, sorry, not quick examples, a couple examples of older newspapers that either have historical relevance or whatever. These are just old newspapers, but if you look at how they used to do newspaper layout, again, some of it's based on the technology because they were literally typesetting everything with, every letter had to get stamped in more or less. Um, Photos weren't really available the same way that they are today. But if you look at some of these older newspapers, if you see here, look at this. We have headlines all over the place. None of them really stand out except for, your headline at the top. But then where do you find that story at? Some of these, I'm impressed. I'm impressed by how vintage newspapers look. Because if you look at a lot of them, it's the same as this one here by the Pittsburgh Press. It is messy, hard to follow. You don't really know what you're looking for. But guess what? Extra, extra. This is the big headline at the top. And now you're going to go find the rest of your story. It's probably a different way to enjoy a newspaper. Here's the other thing: they're trying to put a lot of stuff on this front page. Honestly, if you're trying to sell it, you want it on the front. All right. But again, this is a kind of an old fashioned appeal. Man lands on the moon. I saw a bunch of these moon landing headlines because, again, that was a big deal when that happened. Now, here, technology has advanced a little bit. We can get artwork out a little differently. Look at how we're typesetting. We've got giant letters. Again, they're still doing it that same way I talked about, these print blocks for all of our type. Same thing. You know what your big story is here. All right. There's a hierarchy that's been established simply because these letters are really big. That means that they're important. All right. And this is kind of a more modern one. This is an actual sports section. Um, you can tell what your main story is. It's devoted enough space. It's been given prominent photo, interesting photo. There aren't a lot of things. And again, you can see how different this front page is compared to the other ones. Obviously, there's 50, 60, 70 years difference in terms of how we've decided to lay things out. There's a lot more white space. Your eyes can adjust. Your eyes can find something. Okay, so I wanted to get through those just so that way you can see kind of where we were, where we've come. Now let's talk about what we did on Monday. This is our Monday. This is our Monday section. I'm gonna do a quick. Yeah. We didn't have a key story or a key. We didn't have a key game. All right. One of the things when I'm picking out front page news, we need it to be something that's big, that's relevant, something that can be eye catching. I know that my sports pages are typically buried inside the middle of the paper, even if it is printed as its own section. People don't necessarily see the sports page as a front page. I still see it as a front page, and I treat it as such. I think it's important to consider the placement of every story. So that way you don't just slap stuff someplace. Now, when it comes to the front page, who gets the front page? Winners get the front page. If I can help it, if I have to, I will lean on losers. If we have a team that makes it to a, let's say sectional semifinal, state tournament, even a playoff game when it comes to football, second, third round, there are times when we will run losers on that front page, but it has to be earned. You can't just be a loser losing 25 games in a row and lose at 26th. You're not making the front page. You got to earn your ink. That's kind of a term that I've tabbed. I want a variety of spaces covered. So I don't want all the front page news to be from one school. I want it to be from different schools if possible. I want to establish a hierarchy. Again, what's the biggest thing? What's the second biggest thing? What's important? Some of this, and as I walk through these, you're gonna hear me talk about, hey, we had artwork for this, therefore we're gonna make it big. If we don't have artwork, we can't make it big. We can't do much with it because there's no cool art piece. There aren't cool colors, shapes that are not text to run with it. So anything that we make our front main story, we have to have some artwork. And if you know me, I take photographs. I'll take hopefully good photographs that we can run on our front page to make our front page look good, to give it, give it a little sex appeal in a way. We have to make it visually pleasing and easy to read. So here's what we have. Proving Grounds is definitely our main story. And what is it? Well, we didn't have a game that was necessarily the biggest thing. We had, as we looked at the schedule, I said, look, Brookwood's got an interesting stretch of games here. And this came out Monday. I knew on Tuesday, Brookwood, which was tied for second in girls basketball in the Scenic Bluffs, they were going to face Royal, who was another second place team, and they're going to face Bangor later in the week, the first place team. So they're already better off than what they were last year in terms of wins and losses. What can they do with this really important stretch? Now, we're doing this story in the beginning of the week. I want to create a little buzz for this team that actually is a little different, is a little bit better this year. They're doing things that they couldn't do last year, but here's the big test for them. What do they do this week? So that's what this story was about, and that's why we wanted to build around that. I thought it was something that, number one, we have stock photos that we can use and we can find a way to make that look good. And number two, it serves our readership because we're informing them, this is your team. This is how they've been doing. It's different. If you haven't paid attention to them, we're going to point it out. Again, it's still our job as a reporter to report news. The news, as far as I'm concerned, they're doing better. They're improved. How improved? I guess we'll find out. Now, the other elements that I have on this front page, we had some backlog from holiday tournaments and other things we had to get in. I don't typically like to run a roundup, which is what's on the top of the page, but I did. Hockey typically ends up just being rounded up. We'd have to put that at the bottom. I think I had some other photos, but I also needed those to help create some graphic variety on other pages. So I had the one big piece of artwork. I used some artwork for the cash and basketball stories. Again, on this page. We don't have a ton of artwork, let's say, but we have enough. We know what our main story is. I always put my column on the front page. I probably don't need to, but I do. Also because I have a headshot that goes there, and even that creates just a little visual variety. So it's not this big stretch of gray. Anyways, that's what we did on Monday. I think we get better as the week goes on. So let's go talk about Hillsborough. That comes out on Wednesday. This has typically been one of the, for me, probably my most fun newspaper to work on, simply because I'm familiar with the schools. And right now, this year, these schools have had the most success, and they probably will as a whole. It's fun to talk and to present winners. It's really tough when you don't have teams that win. But we have the same problem. We don't have fresh artwork. We weren't at a game for Hillsborough Royal or Waniwalk last week. So what do? We got to make something up. That's my philosophy. We have to make something up. What is a storyline we can tug on to develop some sort of featurette? So I said, let's kind of do a mid-season report for Hillsborough basketballs. Let's use their holiday tournaments as the vehicle. They each went 1-1. Nothing remarkable about their holiday tournament runs, but how does that set them up for the back half of the season? And I think the girls team has a couple of important games as well. I thought that was important. Why? Because now we have a story. It's an interesting look at what these two teams did, not just what they did, but how these coaches view their holiday tournaments. They're not necessarily worried about the winning. They're worried about developing their players. And this is what they got out of these holiday tournaments. Positioning this angle of story doesn't rely on the wins and losses. It relies on coaches explaining this is what our team does. For you as a reader, you get to see kind of behind the curtain. This is what the coaches are expecting from this. And it plays up our two top priority teams within this paper, which is Hillsborough. Again, for me as a designer, I'm allowed to work with some different artwork, and now I can do that. Again, I put my column on the front. I actually, this was an interesting kind of concept that I went with, because I don't know, I get a little weird about numbers. I want all my numbers to go in order, chronological. And when it comes to baseball cards, comic books, TV guides, newspapers, I want the whole set. And you can tell that there's a set because there's a number, right? Right? If you have 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9, 11, you know that what you're missing, and it's easy to fill in those holes to finish that set. There's got to be something psychologically with that, and that's why we do number things. However, it also gave me an opportunity to provide artwork for one of my columns. So on this front page, we've got 3 pieces of artwork. That's okay. I'm okay with that. And we went with a wide photo. Why? Because it demands your attention differently than a tall photo. But that's what I did with that particular front page. Okay, let's go to Thursday. Thursday is kind of the big day because we've got 2 publications to put out. So my thinking cap has to go on. Now, we had a plan. Thursday is a good example of I had a plan. I was sending our writer out to Sparta. I thought Sparta Holman boys basketball was going to be an interesting ball game. It turned out it was, but Sparta lost. So what do? How do we create a front page when what I thought was going to be our main story kind of falls through? Well, you roll with the punches. I got lucky. I was at hockey in West Salem first. The West Salem girls ended up beating the Viroqua girls. What I saw in the second period, one girl from West Salem scored 2 goals. She ended up with a hat trick. Well, it ended up being the one girl from Bangor that plays for the West Salem Co-op. That is perfectly within our wheelhouse. So what did I do? As I was driving in the car trying to come up with solutions for the failures of wins and losses, I said, that's our artwork. Let's find a way. Now we have good artwork, something that celebrates. And look, she's celebrating something that can get you into the story a little bit. Cool. So we solved that problem. We still could put Sparta on the front page. And as you see, it did. I thought this was an interesting photograph, but they lost. Again, remember, winners get the ink. Losers, especially in a basic regular season game, they don't get the same love. Here we were able to do something different, but again, we had somebody there writing specifically about that game. Um, whatever I have in that right hand column, this roundup, I'm pretty sure I forgot to put a bunch of scores in from holiday breaks, so I smashed all those in. Also, I tried to keep this entire issue to 2 pages because I just didn't have the time to do it. One of the other things that I changed this week, because it was January, the word sports or banner at the top, it was about twice as big at one point in time. I shrunk it down. If it's the interior of a page, do I really need to leave it twice as big? I don't think so. I think this is going to work out just fine. But I have to see it in print in order for me to like it or not. Anyways, let's go to our last front page of the week. All right. So this is the one. This is the issue that I built. This is the issue that I built, and then it all fell apart because some of us forgot to save things, and then we started closing things out. So, same thing. Again, we're coming off the holiday break. A lot of these teams didn't do anything for the last week or so, or if they did, we just couldn't see everybody. We cover a lot of schools. We can't always get to their game to a game, a fresh game, to put them on the front page. Now, this is an example of us going to a recent game. Westby and Cash and girls basketball played each other on Monday. We had good artwork. You'd think that's what we should probably make on the front. However, I chose to put gymnastics as our main artwork. And I'll tell you why. I thought it was, they had a meet, the Westby girls had a home meet last Friday. Gymnastics does not have competitions as often as basketball does. It was a home meet. We had good artwork. And I said, let's find a way to create a story based on results, but let's go talk to coach, ask if we set PRs, ask if we, any of these girls did anything special or different. And we did. We had 6 different girls, ended up with 9 different PRs at that meet last week. That's cool. That's good. That's a positive. This way we're able to send up gymnastics differently than just she won, he lost. Sorry, gymnastics is a she thing. So she won, she was 3rd, she was 8th, she was 10th. This is different than that. But again, I had built this page and it all got destroyed. So I rebuilt it basically the same way, but there are a couple of changes I did make. And I'm looking at this. Oh my gosh. I'm looking at this JPEG here. There are a lot of mistakes on this. This is why we need proofreaders. But again, at 2 a.m. on a second time through, that's not always possible. So I'm seeing text where it shouldn't be. I'm seeing wrong headers. Yeah. Oh, wrong header there. Oof. That's all on me, not taking the time to look at things. Now, again, every newspaper you're going to see will make some sort of mistake. Typically, there's something that ends up having to get pushed or nudged or fudged because of the deadlines. Again, I thought I was doing well, but obviously 2 o'clock in the morning brain on the second attempt of this page did not do me any favors. So that's kind of our walkthrough for the week. Did we get too long-winded? Probably 35 minutes or so. Okay. Anyways, hopefully you can see there that through what we've done with our newspaper pages this week, you can see this is your main art. This is your main story. This is your secondary story. These other things that are smaller or in a single column, they're not as important. That's why my column, typically, I try to keep it to a single column because it doesn't need to be wider than that. I want it on the front page, so I have a headshot, so that adds a little visual variety. It also gives me a different headline. Ideally, I want 3 or 4 headlines on any given front page. That's a good use of our real estate. I think the most I've had is maybe 7 headlines on a front page. But again, some of those end up being single column, half columns, and we jump the stories. And some of you out there know what it's like to see the jump and have to follow it. It can be a little bit of work. However, is it worth it? Yeah, it is if you can put stuff on the front page that's engaging. I've also done front pages where we've only had one image or one story on the front. Those are a lot of fun to do. However, you have to find the right story. Team wins state or a sectional championship to go to state. Yes, that's justification for taking an entire front page for one story. Coach reaches maybe it's a 25 435, or in some rare cases a 60-year long coach decides to retire. Yeah, that is definitely the entire front page. That's a big deal. So let's go through and let's just, again, this is me trying to educate everybody on how I build front pages and what you should expect when you do look at things like a newspaper page, a magazine, a periodical of any sort. We want eye-catching visuals. We want a variety of news. So it's not just police do this, police do that, government does this. We also need old lady knits scarves for happy little elves. We need to establish hierarchy. Something needs to be big, something needs to be small. They are not all equal. If they are, your eye will never find a place to rest. Again, the pages that we've shown, your eye finds a place to rest because that is the biggest thing. That is the most important thing. The size of type, the size of photos, all that stuff, the use of color, that influences that decision, that influences that hierarchy. Now go out in the wild, go look at a newspaper. Everybody still has some sort of local newspaper, I think. Go look and see what their front page looks like. Go see if you can identify the biggest story, the not as big story, or the thing that they just had to put there because they had something that needed to be filled. Yes, sometimes it does happen, but there's always a decision about what is the biggest thing, and the rest of it kind of falls into place. Did you learn something from today's, I guess, lesson? It wasn't supposed to be a lesson per se. Anyways, I also wanted to just show off our pages from the week. Again, what did we do with our publications? We ended up making Brookwood girls basketball a big thing, Hillsborough boys and girls basketball a big thing. We had to improvise and make West Salem girls hockey a thing. And then we had Westby gymnastics because, again, they don't always get front page. When I can give them a little bit of love, that's a good time to do it. Some of my decisions are simply that, hey, we haven't talked about this team. That's a good win. Let's get them on the front page. Sometimes it's pretty easy. They went to state. There's nobody else playing. They are the front page. Anyways, I'm going to end the episode here. I think that's good enough for the day. It makes me feel good to get back here in the studio to talk about something sports related. I know it's not a big, hard hitting, news topic, but you're not going to love every episode I put out, and some people will love this talk to just see. Now, where else can you apply these things? If you're somebody that works in the high school field, guess what? Or with high school kids or high school something, or even collegiately, these same things can be applied to things like yearbooks, to things like websites. Again, your big news articles should be at the, above the fold, as they say, top half of the page. Your lesser news articles, your older news nuggets, bury them, bury those links. They can still be on the front page, but they don't necessarily have to be on that home page before you start scrolling. That's okay. You have to use good artwork. Again, I am such a proponent for using strong visuals. I see it more and more. We just throw something in the thumbnail. We don't straighten it. We don't crop it. It looks like garbage. If you are taking your photo and simply putting it online as is, you're doing it wrong. If you are a news organization or claim to be, and all you're doing is grabbing an image, throwing it in a thumbnail space, not worrying or thinking that it actually matters, you're wrong. That is your headline. That we as a society have we've grown and developed a visual language. We will stop and look at and read thumbnails differently now than what we would have 20 or 30 years ago. The more interesting it is, and again, there is still that idea of interesting. If the visual is interesting, it will get people in. If the visual is just there, people will look at it, but it's not going to get your eyeballs there. And how do you make good artwork? Well, number one, you have to have talent. Somebody with a little bit of talent behind the camera doing the work. You also have to have an intelligent designer who can crop, who can manipulate, who can make the image look maybe better, almost present it better. We have to have presentation. You have to consider the presentation. If you're not doing the right thing. But all that takes skilled people, and we keep getting rid of those. We keep thinking that it's easy to do. Anybody can take a photograph, anybody can put a thing online, and you're not wrong about that. But the best ones, look at the NFL. They are making intelligent decisions with what they put out. They don't just slap a photo in a hole. They're making decisions about how to put that photo in the hole before they do it. The same thing with your large, big colleges and universities. They have good artwork in thumbnails. They have good artwork on lead stories. They aren't just picking random things that are out of focus, cropped weird, or I'm sorry, no crop, or without cropping, that are tilted without purpose. So those are things that hopefully you guys can take forward and go apply to some of your own social media content, your own maybe news bits, whatever. Everything needs to be considered when you put something out for public consumption. And if you're not doing that, are you really doing the job well? Anyways, I love talking about newspaper design. Like I said, I look at a lot. Logan and I look at a lot. We are very, very critical of any newspaper we see. And we wonder, the big thing that we wonder, do these other newspapers look at their own work? Do they question why they're doing what they're doing? Or do they just keep rolling ahead because you need to keep putting out product? If we're not willing to stop, pause, critique our work of the day, we're never going to probably get better. I spent 7 years in school going through critiques and other things. I'm used to that process. There are goods, there are bads. As an artist, I hate being criticized, or I hate some of my decisions being questioned. But on the other hand, we need it to be questioned, because that's the only way you're going to see that wow, I never thought of that. I maybe could have taken, this is a bad color choice. This is a bad choice to have 3 different fonts on this front page. Because now all of a sudden, which one is important? We don't know. And guess what? Sometimes you do need to experiment. I've done that before. I've succeeded in that. That too can help you. But again, without having good critique, good honest critique, you can't get better. And that's really why I wanted to do this today. We'll do this again at some point in time. I'm going to go hit the sports stuff here in a bit again. I get that. But again, thanks for jumping out of this episode. This is how we're going to kick off 2026. I'm excited about it. If I didn't come across as excited, I'm sorry. But I love sharing this side of the work that I do, because even though I put a lot of content online, it's still never wrong, never bad, never unsatisfying to take something, again, like newspaper, hold it in your hand and actually study it and look at it and see what it looks like. Anyways, that's going to wrap it up for the Extended Cutline podcast, January 9th. No. It's episode 1 of 2026. Thanks everybody for listening. I hope I get to see you guys at a game. We're trying to get out from our most local areas. It's tough. Our weather just does not want to cooperate sometimes. But that being said, this was a good episode. Again, go take those lessons forward. If you have questions when you see me in the field, come ask. If you have comments, share them here. Love to hear from everybody or anybody. Hopefully you learned something today, and hopefully we can teach you guys something down the road. Again, go out to a game, go support your local school. We'll talk to you guys. Yeah, we'll talk to you guys next time around. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.